Lift your chin up. No, your other chin. Hey up. Right, first of all, just to address some sound issues from last week's video. People were complaining that my voice was only coming through the left-hand channel. My apologies for that. It turns out I'd inadvertently switched the system over to stereo, so the signal from the mic was only going through the left channel. I'm watching the screen on the camera now, and the camera is receiving two signals, so hopefully all is good this time. Sorry about that. Now, first of all, can I ask you, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. 70 to 80% of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed, which means that if I upload any content in the future that they might be interested in, they won't be alerted. So subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and ensure that your notifications are enabled. Whilst we're on that subject, people are still constantly telling me that they've been unsubscribed from the channel and they don't know why. I don't know why either. It's just something that's always happened with YouTube, and over the last few months it's been worse than ever before. So please check your subscription status on a regular basis, not just for my channel, but for all channels. Right, the question of whether the Classic 350 REborn is any good for pillion use. Short answer is yes. It's far exceeded my expectations. Now, I would describe my partner Paula as motorcycle neutral. She's not really into bikes. And I think the last time she rode pillion with me was about 8 years ago. Generally, whenever we go anywhere together, we tend to sort of take one of the two cars that we have. But a couple of weeks ago, as the awful weather that we've had so far this year started to brighten up, I got a bit fed up of it. Paula's heavily into horticulture. In fact, she's wanted in 15 countries for serial plant killings, which means we have to visit specialist plant shops and garden centres on a regular basis for her to select her next victim. So one day, as I say, a couple of weeks ago, instead of us getting in the car, I pulled the Interceptor out and took her on that. Now, I think she sort of enjoyed it, but she doesn't like the seat on the Interceptor much. So the following day, I refitted the pillion pad on the Mini Mule, the Classic 350 REborn, and the foot pegs, and we went out on that, and it was a bit of a revelation for her, I think. And since then, every time we've been out, weather permitting, to go grocery shopping or go to one of those garden centres, we've taken the bike. And over the course of the last 2 weeks, we've covered about 250 miles. The bike has just been a hack, really, used, you know, for those day-to-day chores that you have to do, shopping and more shopping. And it's been a mix of heavy traffic, A and B roads, as well as unclassified roads, and even some motorway and dual carriageway work. And the Classic 350, I have to say, has really surprised me. As a pillion carrier, it's a far more accomplished motorcycle than I ever gave it credit for. Now, let's just put our cards on the table. This is a single-cylinder 350cc air-cooled motorcycle. Not necessarily the first model that would spring to mind for your average motorcyclist looking for a two-up touring machine. Now, I've been on 2-week touring holidays, long distances, 2-up, with camping equipment on a 125 single, so I knew that the Classic would be able to do it. I just didn't realise how good it would be at it. You see, some bikes are designed from the ground up with taking a Pillion passenger on board in mind. With some bikes, it's a sort of an afterthought. Some small commuters, sports bikes and small trail bikes spring to mind. Okay, when you occasionally need to carry a Pillion, but they're not designed for it and they don't do it well. They tend to raise the centre of gravity a little bit too far. The additional weight overwhelms the rear suspension and it adversely affects comfort, balance and the overall sort of handling of the machine. So the bike requires a lot more concentration and skill from the rider to keep everything in check. Like I say, they'll do it, but they're not good at it. And there are other bikes where Pillion use has been designed into it right from the concept stage. Often, but not exclusively, large to middleweight touring bikes. And at first glance, the Classic 350 REborn does not fit into that category, but that is exactly what it is. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a small capacity single cylinder tourer. Because although this is a great handling bike in the first place as a solo motorcycle, the more weight you burden it with, actually the better it gets. Right, I suppose at this point in time I should give a shout out to Middle Lane Garden Centre in Preston near Hull, who kindly gave me permission to film some B-roll here. I'll leave a link to their Facebook page in the video description down below. It's a family-run business that was taken over by a very hard-working young couple last year. They've taken the garden centre by the scruff of the neck and dragged it kicking and screaming out of obscurity, and it's fast becoming a local horticultural treasure. And I'm using the word horticultural a lot, I'll have to stop that. To understand why the Classic 350 is so good at this job of, touring, Pillion carrying, etc., you've got to look at its history. As a Royal Enfield bullet-derived model, it is, of course, the longest-running motorcycle to be in continuous production in motorcycling history, rapidly approaching 100 years now. And when this new J-Platform Series 350 was first conceived, it had to fit with the expectations of what its predecessor, its ancestor, was able to do. It started life as a military motorcycle adopted by the Indian Army back in the mid-1950s. It was a tough, dependable workhorse, and that's why it sort of sank into the Indian nation's heart, which is without a doubt the reason that it's survived until now. Now, road traffic regulations in India are a little bit different to what they are here in the UK or anywhere else in the Western world. Shall we say they're a little bit more relaxed, and it's not unknown for the humble 350 Bullet or Classic to be used as a family car, carrying 1, 2, 3 or even 4 passengers and a refrigerator, and or the family dog. Now, over the years, the original Classic or Bullet evolved to be able to cope with that kind of use. And of course, when the new J-Series platform came along, it was fully expected that it would be able to do the same. After all, Royal Enfield sell 38,000 of these motorcycles, or thereabouts, each month. So despite its diminutive engine size and mild-mannered personality, it jolly well had to live up to its reputation. Now, while I was trying to get my head around how I'm going to sort of present this review, it cast my mind back to photographs of my dad's old Royal Enfield 350. I remember this bike as a solo motorcycle rotting away in front of our French windows in our backyard back when I was a toddler. And although I don't actually have them now, I do remember photographs of that bike equipped with a huge enclosed sidecar. By the time I was born, my dad had his first car, and that bike had been reverted back to a solo motorcycle. But as a combination outfit, that bike used to take my dad, my mum, my 3 brothers and my sister everywhere, from shopping to their annual holidays. To places like Great Yarmouth and Scotland. I remember the family stories well. And I'll wager that the new J-Series Classic 350 and Bullet are far more accomplished machines than that ever was. It was held together with spit and string. Now, in comparison to the old 350s of yesteryear, the new J platform, of course, has a double duplex frame using the engine as a stressed member, which makes it far stronger and far more rigid. And then there's the rear suspension, which, to look at it, these shocks don't look to be up to much, although I will point out that they're a pain in the arse to adjust. But that doesn't really matter. You see, ordinarily I ride this bike on the lowest spring preload, and on any bike, in order to take a passenger, I would expect to have to whack it up to at least midway. I just adjusted it by 1 point from the slackest preload adjustment, expecting to have to sort of tighten it up even more, because Paula is always the first to complain if the rear shocks are not set up correctly. But as it turned out, it was perfect. In fact, with the combination of the rear touring seat that I have fitted on this bike and the way the suspension was set up, she commented the first thing she said when she got off the bike for the first time is that it's the most comfortable of all the bikes I've ever owned. And I have to admit, the first time I rode it set up like that, I was really shocked. I expected it to be too soft, and that in, certain bends, long sweeping bends, that kind of thing, some wallowing would set in, but there wasn't a hint of misbehaviour from the back end. In around 250 miles on all types of roads, good and bad, it hasn't bottomed out once. And it doesn't seem to matter how much weight you put on the back end. I mean, we've had up to about 15 kilograms of shopping in those panniers. It gives a supremely comfortable ride while still giving good feedback from the road. And like any motorcycle properly designed to take a pillion, it actually handles better with someone and some weight on the back. And it handled well in the first place. Now, of course, it doesn't matter how well designed a motorcycle is for pillion use. You are dependent on having an experienced pillion on the back to help you out on gravel car parks. No bike can do all the work for you. Yes, you do feel the weight at low speeds, especially when the pillion's throwing their arms around searching all the pockets because they think they might have left the phone behind. But once you get out on the open road and start to wind that throttle back, everything changes. These roads get resurfaced about once every 15 years. They're in an atrocious state, but as you can see, with the suspension on this bike, it's like a magic carpet ride. Now, 20 brake horsepower doesn't sound like a lot. In fact, it's not a lot. And when I first rode with a pillion, yes, I did notice a difference in throttle response. This, by the way, is Boreas Hill, the only hill that we actually have in Holderness. Residue from the last ice age, I'm told. Now, any vehicle requires more throttle the more weight that it's carrying. That's just physics. It's just that on some vehicles it's more noticeable than others. And I've got to admit, in the first instance, I did notice it. But that doesn't mean that the bike is underpowered. It's carrying, sort of getting on for a third to a half more weight than it's used to carrying. So to overcome that inertia, it needs more throttle. It's simple physics. And I honestly found that once I'd made that adjustment as a rider, the bike accelerates and the engine behaves in pretty much the way it does when you're riding solo. It just requires more energy and more throttle to do it. This next couple of miles of road, by the way, is the very worst road that I know in my locale. Just watch how the bike behaves on it, especially when you're going through that avenue of trees. We've done vehicle-to-vehicle filming on this section of road in the past from a car, and we have one hell of a job keeping the camera steady, even with camera stabilisation. This next segment should give you an idea of just how smooth the suspension is on this bike with a Pillion. Now, back to the engine. Overall, that additional weight of a Pillion doesn't make a great deal of difference to its performance. The bike can still be hustled. It just means that you have to rev a little bit harder and hang on to the gears a little bit longer than you normally do. Between 40 and 60 miles an hour are this engine's happy place. That's where it's at its absolute smoothest. And that's part of the reason that this bike, as a big single, is so comfortable. 350cc's has always been considered the best compromise, the sweet spot for single-cylinder motorcycles. And the classic 350 REborn is the smoothest single I've ever ridden. And the strange thing about the J Platform 350 is the faster you go, the smoother it gets. No, I don't understand it either. But it's true, and that's what makes it a very capable touring machine. It will easily reach 70 miles an hour and a little bit beyond with a Pillion on the back, on the flat, in neutral winds. Yes, I did encounter some inclines on the motorway and some headwinds that brought the bike down to 65 miles an hour and it wasn't going any faster. Once or twice it even pulled it down to about 62. But once you get back on the flat again, or that wind eases off, it's quite amazing how lively this bike is, in that it can soon recover from 60 miles an hour back up to 74-ish very quickly with a Pillion on the back. At road legal speeds, this bike will take you round the world and back in comfort with a passenger. I'll just let this next bit play out because this is a really nasty piece of road. There you go, absolutely rock steady and totally stable. There are parts of this road where it's cracked and there's like a 6-inch difference from one side of your tyre to another. It's horrendous. Now, the 350 obviously is not a rocket machine. That's not what it's designed to be. That's not what I'm pretending it is. But in the 250 miles that we've done in the last couple of weeks, as I say, with a Pillion on the back, I've never once felt that it was inadequate for whatever situation that we were in. On the motorway, at first, I was quite content to sit at about 60 miles an hour in the left-hand lane because that's where I felt this bike was best suited. But as my confidence with this bike, and I'll get on to why I didn't have confidence in it in a moment, but as my confidence increased, I soon found that we were keeping up with the faster cars on the motorway, inhabiting the middle lane from time to time to overtake trucks and slow-moving vehicles, and generally travelling at 70 miles an hour for the most part. And this bike doesn't feel stressed at all at that speed. Like I say, the faster you go, the smoother it gets. Now, I can't help feeling that I've misjudged this bike, and I think part of it was down to that 350 Hunter, which obviously has the same engine that I tested, was it last year now? Early last year? That bike only had about 3,500 miles on the clock, and I suspect it was still a little bit tight because it did struggle on the motorway. My classic 350 is well past the break-in stage, and I think what's happened is obviously the motor has loosened up and it's now operating sort of optimally. I've always liked the classic 350, but I've never been in love with it. I think, you know, it was just bought in as a channel bike, a mule for reviewing parts and doing fitting videos, that sort of thing. And in that respect, I'd never built up that rider-bike relationship that she deserved. The only time I rode it really was for work, was for making videos for this channel. I'd never even really taken it on a dual carriageway to fully explore its performance. And in that respect, I had badly misjudged what this bike is. And this last 2 weeks, just taking it out for fun with my partner and doing what we should all be doing on our bikes, I don't get a chance much nowadays, has taught me what a capable little machine this is. I even started to refer to it to my partner as my little tank, which always makes her eyes roll. Because it feels like you can just throw anything at it and it will overcome anything that you put in front of it. It will take a beating and it just keeps going. It takes everything in its stride. Now, fuel consumption does suffer a little bit with a Pillion, and the caveat that I'll put to that is that I was riding on some faster roads that I don't normally ride on with this bike, so we were also using more of its performance, which might be partly to blame for the increased fuel use. Total tank capacity is 13 litres. I know that there's sort of 1.5 litres that are unusable, they're dead in the tank because of the way the tank's designed, and on top of that you have about 2.5 litres reserve. So from full to the reserve coming up on the LCD screen, I was getting 180 miles. Normally I'm sort of touching 195 sometime, well, in the early days when I was going a lot slower during the running period, 200 miles. But with a Pillion on the back, riding at normal road speed, 60 miles an hour, and some motorway work, you know, not hanging about, using it at the top end of its perceived performance, as well as quite a bit of stop-start traffic work, it's brought the fuel consumption down to about 81 miles per gallon, which I don't think is bad. Now, the brakes, again, a bit of a new discovery on my part. I don't very often use the rear brake on the classic 350. I tend to depend on the front brake. As you know, the rear brake is a little bit stiff and it doesn't feel like you're getting much braking force. That's the way that they're set up, especially with ABS. Now, with the confidence of knowing that I've got a lot more weight over the back wheel, so we're less likely to lose traction, I did find myself quite quickly putting more braking force on the rear brake, and it actually works really well. To the point where I'm now sharing the braking about 60% at the front, 40% at the back, rather than just occasionally dabbing the back to help scrub off a little bit extra speed. And the rear brake is far more effective when you have a Pillion on board. It also means that you can control front fork dive more effectively because you're not using as much front brake, which provides more comfort for the Pillion and for yourself. I'm just trying to remember if there's anything I've forgotten before I sort of sum my experience of this bike up with a Pillion. One thing that springs to mind is that even with a Pillion in top gear, this bike is quite happy to just trundle along in 30 mile an hour zones, without feeling laboured or suffering from piston slap, which is more than I can say for a couple of the 1200cc bikes that I've owned in the past, where clicking down 1 or 2 cogs is usually the order of the day before the bike's completely happy. Now, the Mini Mule wasn't quite as happy to do that in the early days during the running period, because obviously the engine will have been tight and it needed to loosen up, but it's quite happy to up at 30 miles an hour in top gear. Though if you need to accelerate from that point, you need to take it easy with the throttle, otherwise you do feel as though you're overwhelming it a little bit. And the Seat tyres are absolutely fine. I've got well over 2,000 miles on these tyres now. I've never had a moment of concern with them in any way. Now, as I've always said, I've always believed that the Classic 350 is a cracking little bike, a great commuter, mild-mannered, good on fuel, that kind of thing, easy to maneuver in traffic. A great weekend bike, you can certainly open it up and enjoy the twists and turns and the thrill of the road, for a Sunday afternoon or a Saturday afternoon blast. And I always believed that this bike was capable of being a tourer, as long as you were realistic with your expectations. Probably not what it's best at, but it can certainly do it. But the last 2 weeks has turned that opinion on its head. This will be a great long distance tourer, not because it's fast and it can blast down motorways at 100 miles an hour, because it can, but because this is actually what a proper tourer should be. Stately, sedate, predictable, comfortable, smooth, long-legged, and perfectly capable with a pillion on the back and a load of luggage. It's a bike that doesn't distract you from what you're doing, and that is touring. Touring is about enjoying the journey, taking in the sights, the sounds and the smells, stopping whenever you feel like it at some beauty spot, or simply because you want to, without running to some regimented time schedule. The big problem is that marketing has skewed everyone's perception of what touring on a motorcycle should be like, and I've certainly had the misfortune of accompanying people who have fallen for that sort of hook, line and sinker, where every day has to be an ordeal in the saddle, covering as many miles as is humanly possible, even if it isn't humanly possible, to reach a particular destination, to ensure that you can complete the entire journey before you run out of days off. That's not touring, that's a time trial. It's a test of endurance, it's not a holiday. And I know that I'll get an American somewhere in the comments section for this video saying, a bike like that is no good over here in the States because the distances are so vast. It's 1,000 miles from city A to city B. A bike like that would be no good for me. It would take me 2 days or 3 days to complete the journey. Well, change your destination then, or take a train or an aeroplane, because that is not touring, that is just travelling from A to B as fast as you can. On the completion of a holiday, you shouldn't be so tired and worn out that you need to take a holiday in order to recuperate from the holiday that you've just had. That's madness. A motorcycle touring holiday should be a relaxed journey, taking your time to enjoy the sights, visit new places, enjoy new experiences, and recharge your batteries ready to go back to work. It shouldn't be as stressful as a week at work. And one thing that I can say about the 40 or 50 miles that we did on the motorway 2-up on this bike, despite its perceived performance shortcomings, I never at any time felt compromised, unsafe or vulnerable. It's all about keeping your wits about you and using your experience as a motorcyclist to gauge what manoeuvres are safe and what manoeuvres are ill-advised, and acting accordingly. My personal view is that, as a motorcyclist, if you're the kind of person that likes to take chances, and then when it all goes wrong, rely on the motorcycle's additional performance to get you out of trouble, you shouldn't be riding a motorcycle in the first place. That's just my opinion. Don't diss my little tank. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so, helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. If you would like to show your appreciation as well as leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, you can also show your appreciation via the super thanks button down below or via my Patreon page. Either way, it's much appreciated. I am of course going to be back on Friday, so until then please ride safely and I'll see you soon.